morning, I'm Claire Murphy. This is the Solo Bureau. Coming up a little later, I sat down with an infectious disease expert to talk about a couple of things that are kicking around at the moment. The government making a decision on travel yesterday that we'll get into in a sec. Also, just to be completely transparent here, I am totally fine if you are only here for the headlines. That might be all you need for the day, so dip in, get your update, dip out, you go do you, girl. If you do want to stick around for the chat with Dr. S about Ebola and diphtheria and other fun virusy infection stuff, I know, maybe too much infectious disease this early in the morning, feel free to save that for later. It's at the end so you can listen to the headlines first and pause if you need to. But just in case you don't stick around to the end stuff, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who responded after yesterday's first episode. So much love in the room. I'm feeling quite emotional about it, actually. Yes, journos have real feelings. I know, right? If you do know someone, though, who wants to get across the news but isn't a listener of news bulletins, I do have this up on my Substack as well, which you can find a link to in the show notes so they can read it if that's their preference. I like to do both. I'm also happy to say that I already have my very first news story from a Solo Bureau community member. Soloist? I'm still working on what our group chat title will be. I can't wait to share more. Listen out for Carmen's amazing initiative to help our mental health coming your way tomorrow. In the show notes, you'll find the Solo Bureau's Instagram account. If you want to share a story, slide into those DMs, my friend. Again, and sorry if this gets a little bit much to start with, but please rate and review the show in your favourite podcast app. To those who've already done so, you bloody legends, the algorithm is already algorithming nicely and it is all because of you. So thank you. Okay, it's time to get into what's happening in your world today. It is Tuesday, June 2. The Australian government says they're not restricting any travel to and from countries currently experiencing outbreaks of Ebola, nor are they currently considering quarantine requirements despite the virus appearing to have spread out of West Africa. An outbreak of Ebola has been happening in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and parts of Uganda in recent weeks. The head of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, visited the region saying he was confident that the outbreak would be confined, as the Democratic Republic of the Congo had faced the virus 16 times in the past and managed to end every outbreak. He says he's sure they will go on to do so again for the 17th time. Australia's Health Minister Mark Butler says they're monitoring the situation closely and taking advice from the Centre for Disease Control, saying he has faith in the country's long-standing biosecurity protocols around listed diseases, including Ebola. Meanwhile, the United States has introduced entry restrictions on any non-US passport holders who've been to Uganda or the DRC, banned them from entering for 90 days, while citizens, permanent residents and foreign nationals who do not show any symptoms have to quarantine for 21 days if they've travelled to the affected areas. We do have more coming up, as I mentioned earlier, with Dr. Serena Williams, an infectious disease expert, to go into this in a little bit more detail. A 13-year-old Southeast Queensland boy has been charged with possessing violent extremist material, police alleging he was planning an attack on a school. The boy was taken into custody after allegedly threatening people with a knife at a business in Maryborough on Thursday. Investigators who executed a search warrant on the boy's home confiscated electronic devices and claim on those they found evidence of a threat that involved acts of violence intended to occur at a local school. They're still trying to assess the ideology behind those threats. He's been charged under new legislation passed by the federal government in the wake of the Bondi Terror attack and will appear in court again on Friday. Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott has been elected as the new Liberal Party president and is already using his new position to speak publicly. Mr Abbott was elected unopposed into the role on Friday, with all reports confirming he's popular amongst members and backed by current opposition leader Angus Taylor, who Mr Abbott mentored as he came up through the ranks. The role of the Liberal Party president is usually a more behind-the-scenes position, but Mr Abbott has already been vocal, saying the party president is the organisational leader, not the political leader. But he said, I don't think there's ever been a party president who's taken a vow of silence, and I'm certainly not going to start. He went on to say that he believes his appointment is a sign that his party is fair dinkum about a lot of issues, including cutting back mass migration and scrapping taxes, saying history proves that it's a Liberal national coalition that is the best and strongest alternative government. Some analysts, though, believe Mr Abbott's new role could make Angus Taylor's job more difficult. Shadow Treasurer Tim Wilson already having to downplay Mr Abbott's influence, saying it's the job of the parliamentary party to make the case for policy, not the job of the federal president, going on to say that he is absolutely confident Mr Abbott understands that difference. The rumours are strengthening that the Queen of the Court, Serena Williams, is making her comeback to tennis later this month. Williams' retirement reversal has been talked about for quite some time now, with the star re-entering the International Tennis Integrity Agency's mandatory drug testing pool late last year. Now, this is something that all retired players are required to do if they want to return to competitive tennis. But she responded back then saying, "Oh my God, y'all, I'm not coming back. This wildfire is crazy."
I mean, really? Are you asking this on the Today Show?
Yes, I am.
Oh my God.
They'd kill me if I didn't. Tennis
Really?
Nation, all your fans.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Is that a no?
Is that a no?
Now, sources are saying the 23 Grand Slam title winner is set to return to play at the grass court event in Berlin from June 15. Williams retired in 2022 at the US Open. She has yet to confirm if this rumour is true. Aussie superstar Kylie Minogue has confirmed she's single, but not to be sad for her because she's okay with it. Kylie, who's celebrating 40 years in the music business this year, marked by a Netflix series about her career and a new tour, told the Sydney Morning Herald that she doesn't have a boyfriend currently, explaining she realised that after her last relationship ended, she's actually pretty okay with being on her own. She also said as she's gotten older, she's gotten pickier and says she'd rather stay single than end up dating the wrong person, noting that she has previously dated a narcissist and now is very grateful to be able to spot that particular red flag. That's the latest headlines. If this is where you're logging off, farewell, have a top stay. But if you're sticking around, Dr. S has the lowdown on the recent outbreaks of Ebola in West Africa and diphtheria right here in Australia as we also head into cold and flu season. Now, you heard earlier that the federal government is not imposing border restrictions or quarantine requirements on anyone travelling from countries impacted by the current Ebola outbreak. If you haven't been across it, 2 new suspected cases have been recorded, one in Brazil, a man who travelled to Uganda, and another in Italy, a man who travelled from the Democratic Republic of the Congo where he lives. Both of those countries are currently dealing with Ebola outbreaks. The World Health Organization has reported around 900 suspected cases and more than 200 deaths likely from the disease in the DRC alone. In some positive news, though, 4 people who were infected have now recovered and have been discharged from care. I'm not sure what you know about Ebola, but most of us have possibly seen terrifying scenes in movies depicting the disease's symptoms. So to give us some more insight is Australian National University Professor Sanjaya Senananyika, an infectious disease expert. Dr. S, why are Ebola outbreaks so much more common in West and Central Africa?
So, Claire, we've known about the first, or since the 1970s, about Ebola outbreaks. So there have been a number. And in fact, even though these are poor countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, where the current outbreak is, are normally very good at containing them. So they're very experienced. The reason we see it in that part of Africa and not in other parts of the world is that it is actually what we call a zoonosis, which means that it's an infection that's transmitted from animals to humans. And once it's in a human, it can go to other humans. And the primary reservoir of it are bats. And as you know, bats are associated with a number of infections. This is just another one, Ebola. But it can get into bats and then into other animals, so other primates, gorillas, monkeys, etc. And from them, it can get into us or directly from bats. So that's why it's in that part of the world.
Okay, so what's stopping Australian bats from contracting Ebola and then passing that on to us?
That's a good question in the sense that if the bats were exposed to someone or a creature that it was exposed to the virus, then that is the question. Could it in fact take up the virus and then start spreading it amongst bat populations? That is a possibility. But thankfully, the chance of an Australian bat interacting with someone or something with Ebola is very, very low.
You mentioned before that those countries where they are quite commonly impacted by Ebola have become very good at shutting down outbreaks, but it seems this one is slipping a little bit out of control. Like they are not being able to shut it down as quickly as they usually would. And in fact, the Deputy Director of Médecins Sans Frontières said that never before has an Ebola outbreak recorded so many cases after being declared. What can we make of all that?
Well, what we can make about this particular outbreak is that it went on for some weeks before it got identified. And that's the problem. The key to stopping these outbreaks quickly is to identify them quickly, to work out. And most of these outbreaks, you can look back and go, that was the first person or that was the first group of people who got sick. And knowing that information, it's so valuable because once you have those first cases, or the first case, the index case is what we call it, then you can work out who they were exposed to and who those people who were exposed to that case then went on to have contact with other people. So then you can work out who's at risk of Ebola and you can isolate them before they infect other people. But the problem here is that this outbreak's been going on for a long time. We don't know who the index case was, and we're still only now trying to work out how extensive this outbreak is. At this stage, as of the end of last week, we knew that there were about 200 odd deaths and maybe around 1,100 cases, but the real numbers might be much higher.
Can I ask you too about this particular strain that seems to be spreading? I've been reading that they're struggling to actually treat this particular strain. Is it not responding to treatments that have worked in the past?
So with Ebola, like COVID, like flu, there's different types of flu. There's flu A, there's flu B, and with COVID, we know about all the variants. There's Delta, there's Omicron, etc. Ebola's no different. So there are different strains. There's the Zaire, Sudan strain, and the current one we're dealing with this outbreak, Bondi Bugyo, which is named from memory from a village in Uganda. The issue with this particular strain is that unlike Ebola Zaire, where we have got a vaccine that we know definitely works, and we have got some therapies for people who are sick where it helps, we don't have that same level of vaccine and medication protection for the Bundibugyo strain.
Can you give us some insight on how Ebola spreads? I understand it's not like a coronavirus or a flu or a cold where, you can cough on somebody in the general vicinity and they'll pick it up, but it's more direct bodily fluid transfer. What are the chances of it breaking free from its current West African location?
Yes, so you're quite right. So it's not quite as easy to spread as respiratory infections, respiratory viruses, because you don't tend to breathe it to other people. But yes, most body fluids, when in an infected person, are highly infectious and can be transmitted quite easily that way. That's why we, unfortunately, early on in Ebola outbreaks, before they're recognized, we see a lot of healthcare workers get killed as casualties because of that transmission through bodily fluids. And the other important thing in Central and West Africa are burial ceremonies, because the corpse of someone who's passed away with Ebola is still infectious probably for a good 7 days afterwards. And the traditional funeral ceremonies involve close physical contact with the body. And in the big outbreak about 10 years ago in West Africa, there were a lot of cases that were transmitted through burial. So that's why an important part of this outbreak control is to have dignified but safe burial of cases. In terms of how it can therefore spread, anyone who's incubating Ebola, so they're not sick with it, but they've got the virus inside them, or they've started to get sick, they can get on a plane, they can get on a boat, they can drive to a different African country and then get on a plane or get on a boat, and it can spread to other parts of the world. And in the big West African outbreak about 10 years ago, we saw that where we had cases in other countries, most memorably the United States.
We did have a man in Melbourne who presented just this past week, I believe, with symptoms they thought was Ebola, but it's luckily been cleared of that. But if someone were to have travelled, say, very recently and maybe have come into contact with people who might be from that area or went to that area themselves, what symptoms do we look out for when it comes to Ebola? It's not something we are educated on, really. So what are we looking out for?
Yeah, and the issue with the case that you've described is quite relevant in the sense that it demonstrates nicely the non-specific symptoms of Ebola. So right at the start, after an incubation period, it can be anywhere between 2 days and 21 days. Someone can start to get muscle aches and pains and just feel a bit fluey. And as the term implies, that can be with so many infections, including influenza. So at that stage, it's very hard to differentiate that illness from a whole lot of other infections. Then they start to go on and get other gastrointestinal symptoms like abdominal pain, diarrhea, but again, fairly non-specific. And then you start to get the multi-organ failure where the kidney and other organs don't work so well. And then bleeding can occur, the horrific bleeding that we hear about, and people die. So it is really important in my field when we see someone with a non-specific illness, we always ask them in emergency or in the wards or in clinic whenever we see them, we ask about a travel history. Where have you been? Or have you been to farms? Or have you been mixing with animals? Just so we can get a sense of what they could have been exposed to and also work out when they were exposed. So it helps with the timing.
It would be remiss of me not to have an infectious disease expert in front of me right now to not talk about the outbreak that's currently happening in Australia, and that is diphtheria, which is mostly happening around the Northern Territory with some scattered around elsewhere. But can you give us an idea of what diphtheria even is? It feels like one of those ye olde worldy viruses that we don't really think about anymore. We get an immunisation for it when we're small children. But what even is diphtheria?
So diphtheria is a bacterial infection. And to be honest, you're quite right, Claire. We're a victim of our success when it comes to immunization. So really, about 70, 80 years ago, we started immunizing against diphtheria. And before that, we would see a few thousand children die of this horrific infection. And the main way it manifests is as a respiratory infection, which can cause severe inflammation in the throat. And in its worst form, the throat thickens with this membrane, so you have a lot of difficulty breathing, and it's particularly so for young children. Then the bacteria itself can produce this toxic protein known as a toxin, and that can cause problems with the heart, and it can affect the nerves, particularly in the head and the neck. So it can do some nasty things. There's also a less severe form which can be associated with ulcers, so breaks in the skin, particularly on the legs, but the bacteria in those ulcers, if transmitted to someone else, can cause the throat infection. So it's a nasty, nasty infection, and we thankfully haven't had to worry about it because of immunization over the years. You get the odd case here and there, but not an outbreak like we've seen recently.
Is that, you think, due to us, like you said, a victim of our own success, where we have not been vaccinating as much as we used to because we have become complacent about these things?
Well, certainly there's data showing that in 1 and 2-year-olds up north, the vaccination rates have dropped a little bit. So I think that's certainly part of the story, and this comes on the back of the pandemic, where there's been increased mistrust in health authorities about issues such as vaccination. This is likely to have also occurred in remote communities, Indigenous communities, where there's also difficulty, even if the intent is there to get vaccinated, where it's not always easy to get access to immunization as well. So it's probably multifactorial, but I would have thought that vaccine compliance is part of the story.
And is this outbreak, you think, under control? They are saying that numbers are dropping now, and the Northern Territory government's been rolling out a fairly widespread vaccination program in the wake of it. Have we got this under control?
Yes, so you're quite right that the Northern Territory government's attending to it, and there's also some federal government money which has helped bolster that response. So it sounds like it's coming under control, but it's one of those watch those space areas.
Just finally, while we've got you, we're heading into deep flu, cold territory right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any data on how we're shaping up for this season? We sometimes will see a little surge at the start, which then turns into something. Do we know where cold and flu season is currently in Australia?
Oh, look, don't have a great sense. Traditional flu season's about to start. Some years we get peaks later on, so sometimes in September. And last year, what we had a lot of cases towards the end of the year because there was a new variant or strain that our immune systems weren't as used to, but that's been addressed with the current vaccine. So hopefully we'll have a better flu season than last year where we had very high numbers. But it's one of those ones we just have to wait and see.
And is COVID still a thing?
COVID is still a thing. The big pandemic side of it has gone in terms of that massive surge of cases we initially saw. By 2020, the end of 2022, we realized that COVID wasn't going anywhere. It sort of slotted into all those other respiratory viruses that we see every year, like RSV, human metapneumovirus, causing issues. So it is something that is not gone, but perhaps forgotten by a lot of people. But it's certainly still there and something we need to think about.
Dr. S, thank you so much again for sharing all these insights with us. We normally speak about one infectious disease at a time. Interesting that we have so many kind of converging all at the same time in different parts of the world. But we thank you for steering us through all of this. It's a lot. Thank you.
No, pleasure. Anytime.
Thanks again for being part of the Solo Bureau today. If you want to get your story heard, get into the show's DMs and share it. It could be a community initiative, something that will impact all Aussies, someone who needs help, or just something good happening in your world. I want to help you get it out there. Till then, have a great day, and I'll see you here tomorrow.